Good afternoon. This morning we spoke about how, in order to achieve a state of lasting happiness, it's imperative one cultivates those causes. And in doing so, one also eliminates unwholesome ways of thinking, which are the causes for all forms of suffering. But if, to the extent that one clings to this life, one's mind is going to be dominated by thoughts around various activities and comings and goings in this world, our activities in our place of work, our family, and so forth. And it's thoughts to do with that, and activities resulting from the thoughts to do with this, that will dominate our life. In this way, one doesn't even come to think about the Dharma. But if one has accumulated excellent imprints, has met the Dharma, has an interest, and tries to cultivate the Dharma within, trying to cultivate minds such as generosity, ethics, patience, and so forth. If one's mind, though, is still concerned primarily about this life, things such as gain and loss, pain and pleasure, praise and scorn, fame and infamy, then one's Dharma practice, when one does engage in it, is going to be tainted, because one's motivation is tainted by the eight worldly concerns as an expression of our clinging to this life. Therefore, one needs to abandon clinging to this life, abandon clinging to the pleasures and problems of this life. What we looked at this morning then is that if we don't think about the Dharma, this opportunity is wasted. Moreover, if we do make some effort to cultivate the Dharma within, but our primary focus really is on achieving happiness and overcoming problems within this life, our motivation will be tainted, and therefore we won't be engaging in correct Dharma. So therefore we need to cultivate antidotes to this way of thinking, to clinging to this life. So to abandon clinging, one needs to cultivate an antidotal way of thinking. Clinging is a consciousness, so therefore one needs to develop an opposing, a contrary type of consciousness. But first, just to talk about what is meant by this term clinging. So clinging is similar to attachment, but it is not necessarily attachment, in that clinging comes together with a grasping at something. You can be attached to something without necessarily clinging to it, because attachment comes in many forms of coarse to subtle. Whereas if one is clinging at something, one is not only attached to it, but one is grasping tightly at it. So it is a differing form of attachment. So again, one can be attached without clinging, but if one is clinging, one will be attached. And this clinging is attachment together with a grasping at the object. The antidote to clinging to this life is the deeper reflection on impermanence. This life that we cling to as so dear, that we cling to as so dear, to recognize that this life is impermanent. This word impermanent means momentary change, so it changes moment by moment. In other words, our life is drawing ever close to its end. So here one needs to reflect deeply that our death is certain. Death will come to all of us, and we are in every moment, one moment closer to the end of this life. And whilst there are ways that we can sustain our life to a degree, there are very few causes that can sustain our life, but so many that can lead it to ending even sooner than otherwise. The reflection on the impermanence of this life has these two primary components of reflecting on the certainty of our death, but that our lifespan is uncertain. So the time and our manner of our death is completely unknown to us. So this meditation is particularly powerful to counteract our clinging to this life. But for those who do not accept reincarnation, well, this meditation is not going to have the same impact on them. But the Buddha taught very clearly that not only will death come, but when death comes, our consciousness does not cease. It continues arising in a new form, in a new body. So what direction one takes? Well, there are only two directions one can proceed in at the time of death. One can either remain as one is now in the higher realms, or one can fall into the lower realms. And if one does fall to the lower realms, taking rebirth as an animal, a spirit, or in the hell realms, there one's suffering is intense, and an intensity that is beyond imagine for human beings. And not only is the suffering in the lower realms intense, but one's situation is hopeless. One does not have the capacity to deal with one's suffering. We know as human beings we have a lot of problems and difficulties, but our situation is not hopeless. All too often there are things we can do to mitigate our suffering. We can rely on others, we can come up with various schemes, and we can mitigate our suffering. But in the lower realms, one does not have any hope. There's nothing that one can do to resolve one's suffering. So when death comes, as it will for all of us, there are only these two directions, remaining in the higher realms or falling to the lower realms. That this life will end, that is certain. So too is that we will proceed only in one of two directions, remaining in the higher realms or falling into the lower realms. So this reflection on the impermanence of our life is a key antidote to challenging this clinging to this life. In addition, though, the meditation on impermanence we should take far more broadly so as to counteract this clinging to this life, recognizing that everything that we value that is connected to this life is impermanent. It changes momentarily. This needs to be seen vividly so that we come to recognize that everything that we currently value and strive for and hold dear is not a reliable source of happiness. It's not worthy of placing our hopes in. And through this reflection, we come to recognize that our mental energy and our activities are consumed with achieving or avoiding things, hoping that they will lead to happiness when they cannot do so. And even when we attain them, happiness is not achieved. So we think of our relationships with others. These are impermanent. We have come together, and at some point, we will part. That is the truth with every relationship we have ever had and will have. So too with our possessions. Especially if we think of what we really value, what we cherish. This is impermanent. It will break. It will be lost. It will no longer be able to fulfill our needs. So too is our wealth. And our reputation, the influence we have on others, the power we may have, the control we may have, all of these things that we value, they are impermanent. They are not worthy of placing our hopes in. And so too in this meditation, we go to the other side, to the unwanted situations, where we have a bad relationship with someone. That relationship will change. Either we'll end up having nothing to do with them, or the relationship will improve. This will happen. Moreover, if one is in an unpleasant situation, this too is impermanent. So this reflection on impermanence then, we need to apply in a wide variety of ways to recognize that what we cling to is not lasting. If you think of a possession you have that isn't particularly meaningful for you, particularly if you can replace it easily, it has no real sentimental value. If you meet someone for whom that possession would be beneficial, you'll easily give it away to them, and you'll give it away to them with joy. But if there's a possession, perhaps of equal value, equal lack of rarity, but you hold it as dear, perhaps it has sentimental value, this may be able to really help someone. But because of how you cling to it, you will struggle to give it away. If they don't know you have this possession which would be of great benefit to them, you are unlikely to volunteer that you do, knowing that you'd feel a sense of obligation to give it. So here come to recognize the role that clinging to one's possessions has. Moreover, look at the clinging in relationships. There are many relationships that one does not cling to. If they come into your life, they go out of your life, it's not a problem. But those where there is clinging to either someone that we really like or dislike, that has a very different impact on one's mind. So if one challenges this clinging well by reflecting deeply on impermanence, this mind that clings so tightly to things will lessen. And in this way, one will have much more mental freedom, much more peace of mind. Through this clinging to this life, one's attachment is going to be strong. One is going to also have a home full of possessions. And not only will one have a home full of possessions, they will not be enough. You'll be wanting more. You'll see a new advertisement, a later model will come out, and immediately you'll want it. So this is a very disturbed mind, a very unhappy mind. All that's happening is you acquiring ever more, ever more, ever more. And you can't even throw it away. Much of this, someone else will come by and recognize, never use it, remaining unused, unworn, but you cannot give it away. Maybe one day I'll need it. Or no, this has emotional value. I bought it here, or it was given to me by this person. And in this way, one's mental energy and one's bank account is consumed with acquiring ever more, ever more. And from this, what purpose is achieved? It's not that one is utilizing these things. It's not that they are necessary in one's life, but it's just one cannot let go. One clings too tightly to them. So there are many points to touch on here in this reflection. Come to try to really recognize how uncomfortable it is to be clinging at things all the time, wanting these relationships that we value to remain close, always scared that somehow this relationship will end, completely ignoring that they all will end. Likewise, in terms of our possessions, we need to try to come to a point of wariness towards this mind of clinging, a fatigue towards this mind of clinging, of constantly craving for more. And when one gains something new, that excitement soon passes and one is now drawn to something else. Recognize that everything that one has, one will give it away. If one does not do so willingly now or in the near future, one will do so when death comes. And if one thinks well in this regard, imagining oneself on one's deathbed, but with this house of possessions, things that could have been of use to others, that will change one's relationship to them. And more importantly, what we're trying to do here is to reduce our clinging for new things, for evermore, and to rather relax this clinging towards things of this life. Coming to recognize possessions, desiring them, holding on to them, will not lead to happiness, nor an obsession over relationships or about events, the comings and goings of the world. None of this brings happiness. None of these are engaged with a mind that is free, but it's a mind that's uptight and clinging, stuck to all of these things. Thinking well in this way helps to reprioritize, or help us to get a more balanced approach to what actually has value. Because there are many things in our life that we need, that serve a purpose, and that and therefore we should make use of. That is fine. So that way of thinking is quite different from this overt clinging, this desiring evermore. So that's a more balanced approach. But now this balance we need to extend further to beyond this life. When we recognize that death is coming, everything that I have, every relationship, all this worldly knowledge, all these possessions will be left behind. All that I'll take with me are my imprints. Therefore, those imprints that I cultivate in this life, there is actually nothing more important than those. They are what will accompany my next life. Therefore, now, whilst I have energy, I need to cultivate the minds of the Dharma within, so that I have wealth, that inner wealth of the Dharma, to accompany me into my future lives. So therefore, this reflection on impermanence is applied to many different things. What is of great importance is that this life is impermanent. This very opportunity to practice the Dharma is impermanent. Recognizing that value, we see, though, where we put so much of our time and mental energy, and recognize that actually we're striving to things which will all be left behind. And there we challenge our clinging towards our possessions, our relationships, this body, our name, our reputation, and so forth. And in this way, we weaken our clinging for this life, recognizing that coming to a more balanced approach to what actually has value. And then seeing what has value, we are able to put much more time and mental energy there. So this frees us up to engage in the Dharma in a sustained manner, because our mental focus is far less on the concerns of this life, but much more on ensuring that our mind is in accordance with the Dharma at all times. So this is the skillful technique to challenge our clinging to this life, and to ensure that this habitual tendency of a mind being obsessed with this life, with the affairs of this life, that weakens and eventually will cease entirely. So as I mentioned this morning, when our genuine motivation for practicing the Dharma is to have a better life now, and that's the extent of our motivation, we are not practicing the genuine Dharma. So when one has reflected well on impermanence, come to truly recognize that lives beyond this have far more value, then when we practice the Dharma, we will be practicing the actual Dharma, because our motivation is beyond this life. We will not be practicing the Dharma just to have more peace of mind now. That will be a side effect. But our main focus will be on ensuring that our future lives go well. And in addition to that benefit, the benefit of actually practicing the genuine Dharma, we will have significantly more time to practice the Dharma, because our mind will not be so consumed by the meaningless affairs of this life. When death comes, this body is left behind. What continues, though, into the next life is our mind. This will arise in a new life, in a new body. The old body is left behind. All the possessions, the relationships are left behind. But what accompanies the mind, it's not our friends, not our possessions, not our wealth. It's the imprints on our mind, the karmic imprints on our mind. When we recognize that lives beyond this, that is where we should be focusing our attention, we recognize that actually means is accumulating virtuous karmic imprints, because it's these that will accompany us, and purifying non-virtuous karmic imprints so that less of these accompany us. Therefore, when we are turning away from the affairs of this life, we are turning towards accumulating virtue. And what does it mean to accumulate virtue? It's to strengthen our habituation to wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking. It's those imprints of our way of thinking that accompany us in future lives. So when we turn away from the affairs of this life, the afflictions that arise so easily in relation to the affairs of this life, they'll be reduced. But our wholesome minds, as we strive to have them dominate, these will become ever more frequent, which means we accumulate ever more virtue. And it's those imprints that accompany us, and it's those imprints that lead to beneficial outcomes in lives to come. What is meant then by accumulation of virtue? So let's explore this a little further. A key component is to develop ethical restraint. This determination to abandon what is unethical in terms of our physical behavior, our speech, or even our way of thinking. So in training, one develops a strong determination. I will not harm others. I will not harm them directly, and I'll do my best not to harm them indirectly. And I will not harm them through my physical behavior, my way of speaking, or even my way of thinking. In this way, we constrain ourselves within the bounds of what is ethical. And this is the meaning of ethical restraint. So ethical restraint, in brief, is the being determined not to harm. Its companion mind, the second way to accumulate virtue, is that of generosity. This is the wish to be of benefit to others. So one can be of benefit to others in a wide variety of ways. When we hear the word generosity, immediately material generosity comes to mind. Giving to others who are in need, or to charities that serve others. But it can be expressed very broadly. It comes down to the way to express oneself, to ease the suffering of others, to make their lives better. And this can be done through giving material aid, to giving friendship and companionship, to help others, to protect them when they are in some kind of fear or danger. All of these are ways of giving of oneself so as to benefit others. This is the second practice, that of generosity. The third training is that of patience. So the meaning of the word patience in Buddhism is your mind stays undisturbed in the face of adversity. So most often we think of adversity coming from others, from either a situation or from another person. And the practice of patience is that one's mind is undisturbed, no matter what they are saying or doing. Your mind is relaxed and spacious. This is the practice of patience. And the fourth is that of enthusiastic or joyous perseverance. This is a mind that delights in virtue, that takes great joy or pleasure in engaging in virtue. And it's a key component in accumulating extensive virtue because one is delighting in virtue, one will want to continue to do so repeatedly over a sustained period. So, for example, if one is delighting in being ethical, one will want to be ethical. One will be therefore one will easily be able to refrain from being unethical. So this is the fourth mind, that of enthusiastic perseverance. So these four causes that are of ethics, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance are the causes to accumulate in order to benefit our future lives. But as mentioned this morning, if one is engaging in ethics, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance, but with a motivation that's tainted by one's reputation, by gaining financial benefits, and so forth, if one's motivation is tainted in this way, whilst one is engaging in virtue, it cannot be called genuine Dharma practice or genuine Dharma practice because of the taints of concerns relating to this life. Whereas if one, to the extent that one can free oneself of being concerned about this life's problems and be genuinely focused on accumulating causes to achieve an excellent rebirth, then one is practicing genuine Dharma. And one may have an even greater motivation of wanting to have an excellent rebirth in future lives so that one can continue one's process of spiritual development, progressing towards the attainment of liberation and enlightenment. And with such an excellent motivation, then one's Dharma practice of ethics, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance, these are correct or genuine Dharma. These trainings that have been mentioned, you will hear about them again and again, because these are fundamental practices of the Dharma, fundamental trainings within our mind. These are how we create virtue. But differing people will engage in the same training, but achieve very different results. What varies is primarily the quality of the motivation. So what we've already spoken about, if one engages in these practices, but one is concerned primarily with this life, one couldn't really even call that Dharma practice. But if one has a motivation beyond this life, then that same practice of ethics, generosity, and so forth will be called Dharma practice. But one's motivation can be developed even further than that and create far more stronger karmic imprints. But it comes down to the quality of the motivation primarily. Amongst the various motivations, the supreme motivation is the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So I mentioned earlier these four virtuous practices. The first is that of ethics. And what is ethical restraint? Being determined not to harm others. Not to harm others through our physical behavior, our speech, or even our way of thinking. So that is the practice of ethics. And depending on the quality of the mind motivating this, that determines how much virtue, how much merit, how much positive karma is created. So if one has the motivation that I want to lead each and every single sentient being, every being throughout all the realms, whether a human or animal or an unseen being, each and every one, I take it as my personal responsibility to lead them to a state where they gain freedom from suffering. This is a very powerful motivation because one is holding as dear each and every sentient being. Moreover, one's motivation continues. To be able to actually do that, I have to become a perfected being. I have to become a Buddha, the most skilled of guides. Only then can I lead all beings in a way entirely suited to them as an individual. So I have to become a Buddha. This is the second part of the motivation. One's goal now is the supreme goal, that of Buddhahood. So one's concern is for the supreme number of beings, every being without exception, not some more than others, but all equally. And then secondly, to actually lead them to a state freed of suffering, I have to become a Buddha. So this is the greatest of motivations. Then, when this is expressed through one's ethics, I will not harm others, one's determination not to harm others is incomparable. I will not harm others through my physical behavior, my way of speaking, or my way of thinking, because I want to lead them to a state freed of suffering. How can I do so if I'm harming them in any way? I want to become a Buddha so that I can lead them to a state freed of suffering. How can I become a Buddha if I'm harming those that I say I care for? So this expression, this motivation, is the supreme motivation. And the result of this motivation is that the virtue we accumulate from this ethical restraint is immense. And not only is it immense, this virtue will never be exhausted until the mind that has motivated it has achieved that goal. So until every being attains Buddhahood, that virtue will not be exhausted. So in this way, we come to see how through this greatest of motivations, extensive virtue is accumulated. So this is in the case of ethical restraint. So too with generosity, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, and all other virtuous minds. It's the motivation that determines the amount of merit that is accumulated. And moreover, you can hear from how this was expressed that with such a motivation, there is no presence of the mind clinging to this life. Because one is thinking not just about one's own life or the life of those that one currently cares for, but one is thinking about all beings. And one is not only thinking about this life, one is thinking of a goal far beyond this life. So therefore, the clinging to this life is completely abandoned. So this then is an illustration of a mind of ethical restraint that is a practice of the genuine Dharma, a supreme motivation leading to a supreme accumulation of virtue. If the motivation one is developing, if it's beyond one's current capacity to think of leading all beings to attain a state freed of suffering, if that feels beyond one's current capacity, but one can give rise then to a determined attitude to gain freedom for oneself from suffering, complete freedom, so that one will never suffer in any way again, then this is the motivation of middling strength. This motivation then, when one is committed to, for example, with ethics, I will not harm others because I do not want to create the causes from suffering. I want to gain complete freedom from suffering, therefore I will not harm others. Then one has still a very powerful motivation, not as powerful as before, but a powerful motivation, and one will accumulate extensive virtue. Also, this motivation is free from any clinging to this life, and therefore this practice of ethics, same with generosity, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, this motivation then is one that is leading to actual Dharma being practiced. And if one feels that it's beyond one's current capacity to genuinely be striving for liberation from cyclic existence. Perhaps one doesn't yet have a deep enough understanding of what freedom from cyclic existence means and how to attain it. But one has reflected on the suffering that potentially awaits one after this life, the suffering of the lower realms, and wants to close the door on any possibility of falling into the lower realms in one's next rebirth. Therefore, with a motivation to ensure that my next rebirth is again an excellent rebirth, one then with such a motivation engages in ethics, generosity, and so forth. So this too is a good motivation, a motivation of the actual Dharma, because it is a motivation that is parted from clinging to this life. And it will lead to, whilst it will lead to extensive virtue being accumulated, it won't be as much as for the other two stronger forms of motivation. Nevertheless, it is genuine Dharma practice, and one is accumulating causes for an excellent rebirth in one's next life. So what we've looked at thus far is to come to recognize how our mind and therefore our resulting activities, both our physical activities, what we are saying, is dominated by concerns relating to this one life. This is the expression or the experience of clinging to this life. Our thoughts and therefore our activities are about achieving comforts of this life through a nice environment, what we eat, what we wear, our financial security, our various possessions, our relationships with others, and the various concerns of this life, the comings and goings of this life. Here one needs to reflect well on the futility of a life spent pursuing such concerns. Develop a wariness for a mind that is so obsessed with the concerns of this one life. And to develop this wariness, this fatigue with this way of thinking, one needs to reflect deeply on impermanence. Impermanence is a primary antidote. And impermanence we reflect on in relation to all these things that currently obsess our mind so. Our comfort, the food, the clothing, etc. that we enjoy, our possessions, our wealth, our relationships, recognizing that these are all impermanent. In terms of the meditation on impermanence, it's directed towards everything that currently obsesses our mind. All these expressions of this life that we cling to so. In particular, we reflect on that this life itself will end. And we reflect on the impermanence of this life, that our death is certain, but the time and manner is completely unknown. This is then the topics that one meditates on in relation to impermanence. And in particular, that this opportunity will end. This leads us to think, so how better should I utilize what remains of this life? And that will lead us to the one thing that accompanies us, and that is the karmic imprints on our mental continuum. It's these and these alone that will accompany us. Any non-virtue we've accumulated in this life, especially pursuing the relationships and possessions and so forth, as well as all virtue we've accumulated, it's these imprints and these imprints alone that will accompany us and determine what type of rebirth we attain and what our experiences are. That then leads us to be developing a determined attitude to utilize what remains of this life in a meaningful way, to cultivate virtue. And what does virtue or merit or positive karma mean? It means to cultivate wholesome ways of thinking. Here we spoke about 4. Ethical restraint, that being determined not to harm others. The mind of generosity, the wish to be of benefit to others. Patience, the mind that remains undisturbed in the face of adversity. And fourthly, enthusiastic perseverance, taking delight, taking joy in virtue. So these 4 ways are how we accumulate the Dharma, the minds of the Dharma, and to be able to engage in them wholeheartedly at all times, we need to abandon clinging to this life and this This is achieved through the reflection on impermanence, with impermanence being the antidote to clinging to this life. The result of that is striving to cultivate virtuous ways of thinking, such as ethics. And then lastly, I spoke about how one's motivation for these virtuous minds is what determines the strength of virtuous karma that they accumulate. And in this way, by cultivating one's motivation as well, one's same virtuous activities can lead to extensive accumulations of virtuous karma. And to accumulate virtue, which comes from ways of thinking, one needs to engage in these meditations again and again, repeatedly over a sustained period, so they become habituated to you, that they become a part of who you are. So this is then what we'll talk about. So firstly, when to engage in meditation. It's not a hard and fast rule. What you would have heard is in the morning when you get up. And that is what works for many people, but it may not work for an individual or on a particular day. It really comes down to whenever you have some free time, and therefore your mind is a little relaxed, you're not experiencing any pressure, then meditate. Could be in the morning, could be in the afternoon, could be in the evening. Just need some mental energy and without too much distraction. And then sit down, whether it's on the floor, on a chair, doesn't particularly matter. Just one sits comfortably in a relaxed manner and feel the presence of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Feel yourself in their company. Because meditation is training your mind to think in a particular way. This is something that one can do whenever one's mind is active, which means it can be done morning, afternoon, evening, and it can be done anywhere. It does not have to be done in a particular meditation space. It doesn't even need to be done indoors. If you are outside, you have some time, you have some pressure, not too much distraction around you, you can meditate while standing or sitting outside. Or perhaps after work, before going home, you go into the countryside, you go into a park, somewhere quiet, and there you can meditate. Just sit quietly, stand quietly, in a way that's not obtrusive, and one can then meditate. As mentioned a moment ago, wherever one finds oneself, the first step then in the meditation is to feel the presence of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around you. Call them to mind, imagine them before you, imagine yourself in their presence. And being in their company, turn directly to their teachings. Remind yourself, this life, this precious opportunity is impermanent. It will end. This opportunity is finite. When and how it ends, I do not know, but it will end. And when it ends, this body will be left behind. My mind will continue and arise in a new body. Where that body is going to be in one of two directions. Either, once again, I'll gain rebirth in the fortunate realms, in the higher realms, or I may fall into the lower realms. It's one of those two directions that I will go in. But whatever direction I happen to go in, wherever my next rebirth is, it will still be within the suffering realms of samsara. I will remain bound in the cyclic, this prison of cyclic existence. And recognizing this, one gives rise into a wish. I don't want this to continue. I want to be free of suffering. I want to gain freedom, liberation from cyclic existence, freedom from suffering. So all that then we include in the first step of the meditation. Then into the second. Who has the capacity to guide me so that I gain this freedom? Where can I place my trust? There one turns to the three jewels, recognizing that they are a reliable refuge. One can rely on them to gain protection from suffering, freedom from suffering. So here, with deep trust, with a deep heartfelt conviction, one turns to the three jewels, knowing that I can safely trust their guidance, because it's independence on their guidance I will gain freedom from suffering, protection from suffering. Then the third step, the first was building from impermanence of this life to wanting to gain freedom from suffering. The second was refuge, and now the third step. In the same way that I want to be freed of suffering, This is not a wish that is unique to me. It's not a wish that's unique amongst Buddhists, but every being wants to be freed of suffering. We are all bound in these realms of samsara, experiencing the various sufferings of our birth. Wherever we find ourselves in, suffering is our constant companion. And in the same way that I want to be freed of this, so too does every other being. Reminding oneself of this, generate a mind of love for all, that a tender, affectionate attitude towards others, a sense of closeness to them, wanting them to be happy. Just like I want to be happy, may all beings be happy. And here, take the time to develop a sense of closeness, of tenderness towards others. This is the mind of love, wanting others to be happy, experienced as a tenderness and a closeness to others. Then this is built into compassion, which is the wish, may all beings be freed of suffering. Love is the wish, may all beings be happy. Compassion, may they all be freed from suffering. Because just like I want to be free of suffering, so too do they. Next step then is I'm not satisfied with merely wishing this. I will make it happen. It is my responsibility. It's my responsibility that every being that I counter directly and those that I can impact even indirectly, I will do so in a way that leads them to gain freedom from suffering and abide in lasting happiness. I take on this responsibility. So this determined, courageous mind is the mind of wholehearted resolve. This then is followed by the recognition, I may hold this sincere aspiration, I may mean it 100%, but right now, I currently do not have the capacity to do this. I still am bound in suffering. I am not yet free. I have no idea how to precisely lead others. In general, I have some knowledge, but I don't know how to precisely lead others. But I can develop this skill. I can develop this capacity, and I will do so. I will become a Buddha, the most perfect of guides. And here one generates bodhicitta, the determination to lead all beings to a state freed of suffering, and to do so, become the most skilled of guides, a Buddha. In this way, in the third step of the meditation, one generates bodhicitta. Fourth step in the meditation. So I've developed this determination, I will become a Buddha. Now I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to accumulate those causes, accumulate that virtue. Here one meditates on ethics. I will not harm others. I will not harm them directly or indirectly. I will not harm them through my physical behavior, my way of speaking, and I will not even have my thoughts of harm towards others. I will bring no more suffering into this world. Secondly, generosity. But I will give of myself. I'll be of benefit to others. Wherever and in accordance with my capacity I can be of benefit, I will give of myself. I'll share of myself, and I'll bring happiness into the lives of others. So these are the first two, the determination not to harm, and the secondly, to be of benefit. Thirdly, patience. But whilst engaging with others, I will experience hardships. And whatever hardship I encounter, I will take care of my mind and not let it be disturbed. I will ensure my mind stays relaxed and undisturbed in the face of hardships, whether the hardships come from those I'm trying to help, or they come from a sense of fatigue, a sense of weariness, a sense of it's too much for me. Wherever the sense of hardship comes, I will not allow that to overwhelm my mind. This then is the practice of patience. And the fourth is that of enthusiastic perseverance. So here, intentionally cultivate great joy. Joy that one has cultivated bodhicitta, that cultivated the determination not to harm, and to be of benefit, and not to be overcome by any hardship. Generate a sense of delight. Feel an inner smile within, because this leads to the determination to continue because of taking delight in one's endeavors. So that's, in brief, the meditation. These four broader steps, reflecting on the impermanence of this life, recognizing that one will move to a new rebirth. Then going for refuge, recognizing that the three jewels are where we can gain protection from suffering. And that all beings, and thirdly, all beings are in the same predicament as ourselves, so generate bodhicitta. And then fourthly, engage in the meditation on virtue, the accumulation of the minds of virtue, ethics, generosity, and so forth. In my explanation of the meditation, or my presentation of the meditation, perhaps these three segments combined will take 10 minutes. So it's not a particularly onerous time demand that is placed on you. So what I encourage you to do is to take this meditation, write it down in a way that works for you, and engage in it every day. The most important component here is that of repetition, because the meaning of this word meditation, or its synonyms, are habituation or familiarity. So we're trying to develop a habituation to a particular way of thinking. That is the meaning of meditation. And you can do it whether you're in your home or in the countryside, whether you're sitting on the floor or on a chair, whether you are standing up or even walking around. Take the time and do it every day. In particular, when you've done it a few times and you're quite familiar with the process, you don't even need to rely solely on 10-minute blocks or 20-minute blocks, but you take a few minutes here and there and you remind yourself of that meditation. You re-energize it within you. This is how you develop your habituation. This is how one meditates. So don't confine yourself to a particular posture, a particular time of day, a particular environment, but approach this repeatedly over a sustained period in the way presented, then change will come. And in the meditation I presented, your motivation is one of bodhicitta, which means the virtue that you accumulate in this meditation becomes the causes for Buddhahood itself. Therefore, that virtue, this positive karma, will maintain its capacity, its potential, right until all beings attain Buddhahood. So therefore it goes without saying, if one's motivation is to become a Buddha for the sake of others, this virtue will lead you to have excellent rebirths. That will come as a byproduct. And therefore, of course, one turns away from clinging to this life and embraces the actual Dharma. Because as one engages in this meditation ever more, what will become of ever greater importance to you is being ethical, is being generous, is being patient, and delighting in doing so. And therefore, the delights, the pleasures of this life fade into the background. They do not maintain their current resonance for you. Rather, you're focused on living a life which is truly meaningful, which is accumulating this virtue, strengthening one's habituation to thinking in this way. And by doing so again and again, repeatedly over a sustained period, the mind of ethics will be part of who you are, so too generosity and patience, and one will have a mind that is enthusiastic about this, that delights in it. You will be a patient person, a generous person, an ethical person. This is the very meaning of being habituated to these virtuous ways of thinking. And to get there, it requires this repetition. So then thank you. We can conclude there for today and continue tomorrow. Thank you very much.